Chapter 1: The Social World of Inner-City Girls. Mainstream American society commonly assumes that women and girls do not fight like boys and men. We like to think that women and girls shy away from conflict and physical aggression. Popular representations of mean girls who fight only with body language and relationships and not with fists or knives typify and reinforce mainstream beliefs about gender-based differences in the use of physical force. Yet, not all girls can so easily cast aside any consideration of the use of physical aggression. Some girls, like those featured in this book, learn early on that they must be prepared to fight for their survival. Social scientists often overlook the fact that today's inner-city girl comes of age in the same distressed neighborhoods as those of her male counterparts. Inner-city girls are not isolated from the social consequences of racial segregation, concentrated poverty, and inner-city violence. As the narratives of the adolescent girls in this book show, inner-city girls are touched, figuratively, literally, and daily, by violence. In contrast to the relatively sheltered lives of middle-class, suburban girls, African American inner-city girls' lives are shaped by the salience of the drug trade, a widespread distrust of social institutions and social relationships, and regular exposure to chaotic and too often violent conditions, whether at school or in the neighborhood. These girls see other adolescent girls fight with fists and knives, and sometimes they do so too. The ethnographic observations, scenes, and portraits in this book show how the circumstances of inner-city life shape the social world of today's inner-city girl. These stories elucidate the settings that adolescent inner-city girls share with teenaged boys and men, yet show how gender mediates their interactions within the same social space. As with poor black boys, the circumstances under which these girls live demand an understanding of how to manage threats of interpersonal violence in these settings. At the same time, socializing girls for inner-city survival presents new challenges and dilemmas for African American grandmothers, mothers, and other mothers who are bringing girls up in this setting. These challenges, among others, are revealed in the ethnographic portrait of one inner-city girl's attempt to respond to a violent attack that concludes this chapter. Taken together, these stories highlight important aspects of the social world of inner-city girls and help us to better understand how those who care for these girls manage the chaos that too often characterizes their lives. The urban terrain, school, the block, and the corner. Like that of other adolescent girls in America, the social world of the inner-city girl is significantly shaped by her interactions and experiences in a few key settings, most notably, her home, her school, and her neighborhood. In some ways, urban public high schools are a lot like other large public high schools in urban and suburban areas around the country. The school days in urban high schools go through periods of relative calm and relative chaos. Between classes, students crowd the hallways in boisterous swarms. The school's corridors and stairwells pulse with the high energy of adolescence. The noise fades as the hallways empty and the classrooms fill, echoing the daily rhythm of school life across the nation. But a lack of order, a sense that things are out of control, as Naima, one of my respondents, says, distinguishes many urban public schools from schools with more institutional support and economic resources. During a visit to Martin Luther King, MLK, High, for example, I breathed in the lingering scent of marijuana that clings to some students as they make their way through the front entrance security checks. Graduates and others familiar with the school suggested to me that security guards ignore students who arrive at school high on marijuana because the drug makes the young people less difficult to deal with. But even security violations the guards are actively interested in preventing, including bringing weapons onto school grounds, occur with regularity. Innovative students find ways around the security checkpoint, others are adept at fooling the school security systems. During the several-month period that I visited the prison on the Hill, for example, a group of teenaged girls entered the high school and, armed with box cutters, launched a violent lunchroom battle that drew much attention from the local news media. Inner-city residents feel that the violence in these schools is getting worse, especially among the girls. MLK High graduate Naima tells me that while the school was violent when she was a student, it was more controlled better. In many cases, Naima explains, conflicts at school are extensions of battles for respect both within and between neighborhoods, it's just, like, a neighborhood thing. That's how it was when I was there, neighborhoods against neighborhoods. In Philadelphia, street numbers, one's block, or housing project affiliation are often used to distinguish cliques or sets within geographical regions of the city, for example, within North or South Philadelphia. NYMA describes for me how territory is negotiated between neighborhoods, like out Carver projects, that's where Martin Luther King High is, and nobody from 23rd Street can come over there, but they go to school there. But they, Carver project students, didn't like them, 23rd Street students, so it was a big thing. The way that students are assigned to high schools does not necessarily reflect these various affiliations, and brings together groups of teenaged girls and boys who are at times antagonistic towards each other for reasons that are rooted in these block-by-block distinctions. While fights among adolescents are not unusual, anxiety around fights in inner-city schools reflects deep fears about lethal violence. In recent years, the use of weapons, especially guns and knives, has made school fights more dangerous. NYMA comments on this difference. Like now, when I hear recent stories about MLK High School, like, they was shooting in one classroom and then they was starting fires. Like, none of that never happened when I was there. Like we had, what you call them? Metal detectors, and, like somebody got caught with some mace or something, but no guns or knives or none of that. NYMA has heard that the high school is slated for closure. She, like many others in the neighborhood, finds not regret but relief in that possibility. For urban adolescents who are coming of age in neighborhoods marked by a deeply entrenched drug trade, and the violence that commonly accompanies such activity, their observations, experiences, and interactions inside and outside of the school setting deeply inform their beliefs about safety, justice, and survival. For example, in recent years, the corner, as it is described by youth, has emerged as a distinct social setting in the lives of inner-city adolescents. The corners of city blocks traditionally have served as hubs of local activity. These spaces have been well documented as anchors of social interaction and sites of social organization. In today's inner-city neighborhoods, the corner marks a geographic space of belonging for some and uncertainty for others. The corner, which is frequently the eye of the storm for much of the lethal violence that occurs in the neighborhood, is often marked, physically and symbolically, by groups of young black men wearing baggy denim jeans and white t-shirts, or some other version of urban attire. Neighborhood residents typically know which corners are owned by the drug dealers, even though they may not know the names of the young men who crowd around the stoop nearest to the corner or hang out near the entrance to the local corner store. Indeed, residents are well aware that buying and selling illegal drugs are now primary uses of the corner space. The corner is also a gathering place and a staging area for some of the neighborhood's young men, and at times, young women, too. The corner is a prime location for social observation. Sometimes, young men sit or stand quietly, simply staring as people pass by. Other times, the corner is noisy with the sounds of playful, flirtatious exchanges as young men and women casually evaluate one another. Young men may use the corner to prove something to their male peers. They may, for example, stake their claim to being somebody by deliberately, and without invitation, breaching the space of young women who pass by. The adolescent boys and young men who sell drugs on the corner occupy several social status positions within the neighborhood. Their involvement in the illegal drug trade does not necessarily exclude them altogether from enacting their roles as brothers, sons, or boyfriends. At times, they may try to mimic some of the practices of the old heads, older African American men who helped shape previous generations of children and young adults. They may look out for some residents and adopt a protective attitude toward others on the block, including those individuals they think may have a chance for finding success in the future in some legitimate activity. Lauren, for example, a 14-year-old girl who shares a home in West Philadelphia with her mother, two older sisters, an older brother, and a niece, has been adopted, in her words, by a former boyfriend of one of her sisters who regularly spends time on the corner. Adult supervision is largely absent from Lauren's daily life. Her grandfather, people dubbed her his shadow, recently died. Her mother works full-time as an office assistant. This is not to say that she is unloved, Her mother tries to maintain discipline and structure through weekly family meetings, and threatens to send her to live with her father, who has relocated to Florida, when she acts up. Like many others in the neighborhood, Lauren is familiar with the boys on the corner. She knows that they sell drugs there. She also knows that the corner is where her old head works. I ask Lauren about the role of the old heads. They be acting like they your older brother, looking out for you, she explains. The young men on the corner use their location to keep an eye on the activities of neighborhood residents, including adolescent girls like Lauren. Her old head encourages her to stay out of trouble, she says, and he knows when she should be in school. Lauren provides an example of how her self-styled street mentor monitors her behavior. After she left school early one day and walked by the corner on her way home, he got all up on me like, "Why ain't you at school?" I was like, "Dag, you know you ain't my dad." But the perceived positive contributions individual young men involved in the local drug market may make to their neighborhoods are offset by the street violence that accompanies the drug trade. As a result, relationships between the young black men and boys who hang out on the corners and neighborhood residents are tenuous. Some adolescent girls may relate to certain of the men on the corner as big brothers or as father-like figures. Other neighborhood residents may even express their frustration with a social structure that has limited young men's ability to envision opportunities for making a living outside of the drug trade. Still others, particularly older urban residents, are likely to express dismay over the corner crowd. They could be anything they want, one grandmother tells me, the disappointment evident in her voice. They don't have to be out there selling drugs. Making sense of death, he didn't do anything. The salience of drug markets in inner-city neighborhoods has not been diminished by the never-ending war on drugs, which has locked some families into generational cycles of poverty and official criminality. In the most economically compromised areas of Philadelphia, some young black women who sell drugs make themselves vulnerable to the same types of violence that threatens the lives of their male counterparts. In addition, and perhaps more commonly, young women hold drugs for young men who are selling in school or in the neighborhood. Sarita, who grew up in the notorious Carver Projects and now attends a predominantly white, elite liberal arts college in the Northeast, confided that she had made a little money during her middle school years by assisting a classmate who sold drugs during the school day. "My job in helping him was just holding his money." Even holding money is dangerous because of the unexpected and oftentimes horrific nature of drug-related violence. Many of the young people I spoke with quickly recalled friends, relatives, or neighbors who had been caught in drug-related violence. A common thread of these remembrances is how this violence dramatically interrupts the life chances of otherwise innocent young people. Sarita witnessed a nightmarish episode of violence while visiting her half-sister's father in North Philadelphia. Despite the violence of her own area, she was unprepared for the shock. "I remember one time it was me and my cousin," she recalls, "and a couple of our friends, and we're walking down 29th Street, just walking on one summer day. Walking ahead of them was a young boy named Sean, whom most neighborhood residents knew as a good kid," she says. Unlike other young men his age who spent time on the streets and the corner, Sean stayed in the house, Sarita remembers, like, a lot. He had a simple weekday routine that, she says, most residents on his block were familiar with. He would come home from school and be in the house. During school breaks, his mother worked to insulate Sean from the potential dangers of the street by filling his day with activities. Sarita remembers, in the summertime, his mom would have him in summer camps. Sean's mother's efforts to insulate him from known and imagined threats ultimately failed. Sarita explains, "We were both walking down the street and he's in front of the Jehovah's Witnesses Kingdom Hall. He was standing in front of there talking to somebody he knew. We're like a half a block away, and some other guy was standing on the corner. So this car rolls around and starts shooting." Sarita and her cousins had learned at an early age what to do as soon as shots begin to ring out. "We all hit the ground," she says, but Sean hesitated. "He was a little bit slow hitting the ground," Sarita recalls, "and he got shot, and so did the guy who was standing like 5 or 10 feet away from him." Sean later died from his gunshot wound. For Sarita, the impact of witnessing such a violent scene endures today. Like that really sticks out in my mind because it was an incident where, I think I may have been in like 4th grade at the time, and it was like, I distinctly remember being like, he didn't do anything. Like, he was told to go to the store and come back and he was on his way to the store. He just stopped to talk to somebody and then, got caught. In neighborhoods like the ones in which Sean, Lauren, and Sarita live, such tragic scenes are not extraordinary. Simmering tensions erupt in drug-related murders or over seemingly trivial slights or demonstrations of disrespect, such as hard stares or bumps, which, given the easy access to guns in distressed urban areas, can quickly escalate to serious or lethal violence. Such violent eruptions and the reactions to these incidents by the community and especially the police fuel fears about safety and survival in the inner city. These dramatic events, from crack house killings to deaths from stray bullets, deeply influence the social worlds of adolescent boys and girls growing up in the inner city. Among young people, including girls, these experiences shape perceptions of the necessity, utility, and consequences of aggression and violence. Socializing inner-city girls for survival. Today's adolescent inner-city girl is no stranger to chaos, conflict, or violence. By the time she has reached her early teens, she is aware that fights with fists, knives, and box cutters occur among girls in school and in her neighborhood. She knows that boys and men involved in the drug game are gunned down while plying their trade on street corners or city blocks, and young, innocent bystanders sometimes die in the crossfire. It is difficult for inner-city girls and the women who care for them to embrace or express hope that the circumstances of inner-city life will ever change. In addition to raising girls to withstand the racism and sexism they are likely to encounter as grown-up Black women in America, mothers, grandmothers caring for their children's children, and other mothers, mired in the trenches of poverty, must now also teach girls how to manage the physical threats that they are likely to encounter in everyday life. Socializing girls for this sort of survival, teaching them to figuratively and literally fight to protect their personal boundaries, for example, presents a dilemma for women who are trying to be good mothers and for those women who are committed to raising African American, inner-city girls to become respectable Black ladies. This is a dilemma that few middle-class mothers in suburban areas encounter. It may be difficult for people who live in safe and stable neighborhoods to understand why some mothers may feel compelled to teach their daughters to become able fighters. Passing on such lessons to adolescent girls violates widely held beliefs about appropriate behavior for girls and seems far apart from commonly held understandings about what it means to be a good mother. My conversations with mothers and daughters who embrace these lessons revealed that mothers who encourage their daughters to become able fighters often believe that they are passing on a lesson that is necessary for a girl's survival in troubled neighborhoods. Oftentimes, mothers are instructing their daughters based on their own experiences as children in the same or similar neighborhood settings, when they too had to fight to protect themselves. Ms. Jackson, the mother of Neka, a teenaged girl with a tough demeanor, explained to me how she learned to fight in high school and felt compelled to pass this lesson on to her daughter. Ms. Jackson recalled one Christmas during her high school years when she received a down coat, then the height of style and an expensive gift. When she returned to school after Christmas break, some girls in her high school beat her up and tore her brand new coat. When she got home, her mother beat her as well for returning with a ripped coat. After this incident, Ms. Jackson's then boyfriend taught her how to fight so she would not continue to get beat up by either the girls in her school or her mother. As a mother, Ms. Jackson also began to pass these lessons along, once it became clear to her that her children needed to know how to fight to survive in their neighborhood, where kids physically challenged other kids every day. This became particularly clear to her after Neka was seriously injured when a young boy kicked her in the stomach and into the inside of a trash can. Ms. Jackson recalls that Neka could not eat for 2 days after the incident. Once Neka recovered, Ms. Jackson repeated the instructions she received from her old boyfriend. After sharing this story with me, Ms. Jackson paused, and clarified that she was simply trying to be a good mom. Already, she had lost one son to the streets. She did not want her daughter to become a statistic, she said. For mothers like Ms. Jackson, teaching their children, boys and girls, to physically defend themselves when they are not there to protect them is a key survival lesson that they feel responsible for passing along. In addition to encouraging their daughters to become able fighters, some mothers I spoke to actively involve themselves in the interpersonal conflicts of their children. They may orchestrate a fight among adolescents or get their daughters back in a fight, difficult as this may be for some readers to imagine. Generally, we expect parents to model behavior that discourages the use of violence. Yet, parenting styles also reflect a personal set of resources and experiences, emotional, psychological, economic, and social. These resources are not spread out equally among mothers or caretakers, and parents who live in distressed urban areas must account for potential threats of violence that are unique to inner-city life. Given the set of circumstances inner-city adolescents must face, it is not uncommon to encounter mothers who teach their daughters not to shy away from potential conflicts. Mothers who are more adept at negotiating complicated emotional situations and who want to model decent behavior for their children may encourage their daughters to avoid or ignore instigators, or to de-escalate a situation by talking it out. Yet, these mothers are also aware that such efforts may be wasted on other girls who have a point to prove about their own toughness. If these efforts fail, these same girls may be encouraged to fight as a final resort. If you didn't fight, you got picked on more, one mother explained to me. When ongoing animosities between adolescent girls escalate to the level of physical conflict, mothers may also be called on to come to the scene of a fight to take on a supervisory role. As Danielle explained, her mother came to one conflict not to stop the fight her daughter seemed likely to be caught up in, but to make sure it did not turn into what she described as a bloodbath. The fight where Delisha, a teenaged girl, was cut on the arm was also arranged by a mother, showing that a supervisor cannot always safeguard against serious escalations of fistfights. The conflict began, Delisha explained, when she had words with a neighborhood girl and a fight erupted. When it ended, a second battle began. Once the fight was over, my girlfriend, Tekka, said that she wanted to fight her, the neighborhood girl. So, I wasn't going to leave her around there, by herself. So, I stayed around there, and her mom said, she doesn't want to fight Tekka, she wants to fight Delisha again. So, me and her were about to fight. Encouraged by her mother, the neighborhood girl once again took Delisha on. Perhaps overwhelmed by the pressure to meet her mother's demands, this adolescent girl violated the grounds of a fair fight. Using a box cutter secured a definitive victory, one that was sure to end the conflict between the two teenagers, at least in the short term. Mothers with credible street reputations as tough women may also abandon their customary supervisory role and insert themselves into conflicts, and adolescent girls whose mothers have a fighter's reputation can also trade on their parents' strength. Peers may avoid conflicts with her for fear that confrontations might escalate into a physical fight between mothers. Sarita, for example, knows that her mother's reputation shielded her from many fistfights with girls when she was growing up in the projects. They knew, she explained, that if you get into a fight with me, then my mom is going to yell at your mom and my mom might fight your mom. For much of the 20th century, the major threat to a poor, Black girl's well-being was considered to be the racism and sexism that would be directed at her by the outer, wider world. Stories of Black mothers raising their daughters to overcome the multiple obstacles they are likely to encounter reflect the special attention African American mothers give to teaching their daughters how to survive such oppressive conditions. These survival lessons, however, have not typically included an embrace of a physical strength that can be directed at other Black girls. This lesson has only emerged as necessary over the last few decades as inner-city life itself has gotten harsher and the consequences for failing to adequately protect oneself have grown more dire. Today, inner-city, adolescent girls and their mothers are aware that their home front has turned into its own battleground. In this urban battlefield, girls and their mothers learn that skin color does not guarantee solidarity, and Black life, even innocent Black life, is expendable. Black youth fight, injure, and kill other Black youth. This awareness of the circumstances of inner-city life influences how mothers socialize the girls under their care. Black mothers raising daughters in today's inner city continue to work to instill a strong sense of independence in their daughters and encourage them to recognize their own essential role in maintaining their own well-being. They teach young women to identify and respond to actual and potential threats, and encourage girls to realize that one of their most valuable resources is their own strength. By the time urban, adolescent girls reach their late teens, they have internalized these lessons of self-reliance and independence, usually in a way that includes an acknowledgement that violence is a fact of inner-city life. Teenaged girls who have lived through especially challenging life circumstances may come to think of themselves as grown. In everyday conversations, grown is a term used to describe adolescent girls whose level of maturity appears to be greater than what is typical for their chronological age. This mismatch between age and maturity is also likely to occur among girls who have come to terms with parental neglect or abandonment. Other experiences that may contribute to a girl's accelerated sense of maturity include an early pregnancy, a level of financial independence, sometimes secured with an illegal hustle, or a history of taking care of herself or supporting others. Witnessing extreme expressions of violence, like the shootouts that sometimes accompany local drug dealing, also lead young women to consider themselves grown. The combination of this appreciation for independence and accelerated maturity may make it difficult for mothers and grandmothers to communicate with their daughters or granddaughters effectively. In extreme circumstances, women may become frustrated and exhausted by their failed attempts to manage their daughters or granddaughters and may relinquish responsibility to school administrators, teachers, or even the juvenile or criminal justice system. The role of grandmothers. Historically, Black grandmothers either have assisted in the care of children or have taken over care altogether. This remained true during the periods of violence that characterized much of inner-city life in the late 1980s and early 1990s, when women took in their grandchildren after their own children became casualties of the street, and this pattern continues today. The contemporary circumstances of inner-city life present physical, emotional, and financial challenges for grandmothers who are caring for their grandchildren. Wise grandmothers encourage their granddaughters to be good girls and to isolate themselves socially as a way to avoid violent interactions. Grandmothers are also likely to emphasize the importance of formal education. In addition to encouraging young women to stay inside and study, grandmothers, especially when their children have histories of drug use, violence, or crime, frequently warn adolescent girls to avoid the dangers of the street, pointing out the areas of the neighborhood and the people they ought to avoid, especially the places and spaces where drug dealers work or hang out. The knowledge and fear of such areas influences even the most mundane, everyday decisions. For example, during the preparations for a family party at a home in West Philadelphia, I listened as a grandmother instructed family members, including her children, grandchildren, and great-grandchildren, on where to buy a mixed salad for the party. When one of the adult daughters, who appeared to be in her early 40s, announced, "I'm going to go to Greens," her mother cut in firmly, advising, "I wouldn't go there, that's a drug haven." As the assembled group gave the grandmother their full attention, she explained how the drug dealers hang out in groups in the area outside the entrance to Greens Market. After a moment of silence during which the listening women pondered the grandmother's warning, the daughter responded, "They're all drug havens around this way." And the others, amid laughter, confirmed, "I know that's right." In the end, the mixed salad was purchased at a store located outside of the neighborhood. For teenaged girls, repeated warnings and attempts to constrain their social mobility may or may not have the desired effect. Some seriously heed the warnings and work to become the good kids their grandmothers want them to be. Others, however, find the approach taken by grandmothers too restrictive. Either way, grandmothers cannot insulate their grandchildren from involvement in all forms of interpersonal conflict, and in acknowledgement of this fact of inner-city life, some grandmothers also teach their granddaughters how to negotiate physical conflicts. When an adolescent girl gets into a fight and comes home crying, it is not altogether uncommon for a grandmother who realizes the importance of avoiding a reputation as a weak person to send her granddaughter back out for a fair fight. Grandmothers who encourage their granddaughters to meet battles head-on understand that in the inner city, you need not have a reputation as crazy or violent, but you must be able to fight your own battles when necessary or become vulnerable to future challenges. Delicia's grandmother, for example, tried to teach her granddaughter how to protect herself. In explaining why she would not limit her own mobility in order to avoid the very real possibility of a second violent encounter with a girl who had wounded her with a box cutter, Delicia asserted, My grandma never raised me to look over my shoulder. The orchestrations and interventions of mothers, along with the strict directives of grandmothers, encourage inner-city girls in their late teens to realize that they must be responsible for their own well-being, even those who have a network of friends or family that will get their back. Girls come to believe that they cannot naively expect anyone else to act on their behalf. Like many other inner-city residents, girls come to see many people as out for themselves and acknowledge that they too must not expect anyone else to make them safe. Ultimately, teaching adolescent girls how to physically defend their personal boundaries provides them with a resource that they need to navigate their neighborhood streets. At the same time, this kind of instruction also transmits an early and important lesson from one generation of Black women to the next: you are responsible for your own well-being. Such a lesson contrasts sharply with the socialization experiences of many middle-class, suburban youth. In inner-city settings that are governed by the code of the street, women's attempts to socialize their children for survival often require that they adopt beliefs and behaviors directly opposed to mainstream expectations of appropriate femininity and the gendered expectations reflected in the image of the Black lady. What outsiders often have difficulty understanding, however, is that oftentimes, these actions and behaviors emerge from attempts to navigate extremely challenging and potentially life-threatening circumstances. Inner-city mothers, grandmothers, and other mothers must make hard choices about how best to socialize Black girls for survival. For many poor, African American women, and especially for those living in violent neighborhoods, the pressure to regularly feel required to make hard choices among, at times, very poor options is often the most stable condition of their lives. In this setting, it would be a great disservice for mothers or grandmothers not to teach the girls under their care how to protect themselves from potential threats of violence in the neighborhood. Still, it is a lesson that comes with complicated consequences. Girls who embrace these lessons about strength and survival too deeply, for example, girls who fight all the time, risk confirming the most base stereotypes others hold about poor, Black women and girls. The following narrative highlights the dilemmas faced by inner-city mothers and girls, and the hard choices made by one girl's mother who, like many poor, Black mothers, struggles with the choice to do what is right morally versus what is necessary. Shantae's story also illustrates how one adolescent inner-city girl comes to learn that she must take an active role in defending herself from potential attacks. In practice, this realization means that girls like Shantae must find a way to resolve conflicts without the help of formal institutions, such as the police. Shantae's story. Shantae, a 16-year-old African American girl, lives in South Philadelphia, near the Carver Projects. She spends the majority of her time in the house, while her slightly older sister spends most of her time on the street. Shantae, well aware of the potential dangers facing girls who spend much time on the street, worries about her sister. After a year of suspensions, punishments, and running away, Shantae's sister was eventually put away in a residential detention center for young women. Her sister is doing all right now, though. She has been assigned to a rehabilitation center and recently earned a home pass that allows her to visit for the weekend. Shantae's younger brother has a chronic illness, but he still go out there and have his fun like a normal teenager would, she says. Sometimes her brother runs into more than just fun outside. With his slight build, he is a frequent target of other young boys' public challenges. He just got jumped recently. Weekdays begin early for Shantae. She transferred from Martin Luther King High School to Southwestern High recently, and must get up at 6 each morning in order to make it to school on time. After school, she usually returns home, where she watches television or talks on the phone. She socializes with a very small network of friends and family. A number of the teenaged girls in her social circle are already mothers, but Shantae has no intentions of joining their club. One of my friends got a baby. My old friend got a baby. My other friend got a daughter. All these friends got a lot of kids. That don't make no sense. It don't. Shantae tells me that when she grows up, she would like to be someone who delivers babies. Right now, she would be happy with a job in retail or even a position at a fast food restaurant. Shantae has lived close to the Carver housing projects most of her life. She has been involved in the occasional fight, yet she has never considered herself a fighter. See Chapter 3 for a discussion of the distinction girls make between fighting occasionally and being a fighter. When she was 15, another teenaged girl from the neighborhood bashed her in the head with a brick. Initially, Shantae had no idea what had instigated this attack. In the months following the incident, she realized that it was a case of the he say/she say, a common cause of fights between adolescent girls in this setting. The he say/she say begins when one person hears that another has said something derogatory about them. The original source of the rumor is not always known. Shantae explains, "I don't know who was going back around saying this stuff to the young woman who hit her, that yeah, Shantae said she don't like the way you walk because you bow-legged." What is alleged to have been said in a he say/she say exchange is, as Shantae recognizes, often far from the truth. "How I'm going to judge someone I don't even know them?" Shantae asks. "How am I not going to like this girl just because of the way she walk?" In adolescent inner-city worlds, the he say/she say, even when based on false rumors, can quickly escalate into physical conflicts. Both parties' reputations in the neighborhood are potentially at stake. One or both of the young women may feel she has to respond to the he say/she say, either verbally or physically. Shantae describes how the he say/she say interaction unfolded in her case. "After school, I left like 10 minutes early, and I seen her on the corner with her boyfriend. And me and my friend walked to the store. I walked her to the store, and she live in Carver Projects and I live on Carver Street, so I said, I'm going to walk you to the store, and I'm going to walk up Carver Street 'cause she was going that way anyway. So I'm walking, my friend goes to the projects 'cause that's where she live. I'm still walking straight, on Carver Street. I was on my way home. I was just about to walk in the middle of the street, when she grabbed me by the back of my hair and was hitting me with it, the brick. I went to the hospital 'cause I had to get staples in my head and something was wrong with my wrist." It is not uncommon for inner-city, adolescent girls who are involved in serious physical conflicts to call on their mothers for help, if they are available. In neighborhoods where city residents feel little trust in institutional authorities, mothers may decide to respond to a violent incident in a way that is consistent with the culture of the code. For example, when Shantae's mom learned that her daughter had been hit with a brick, she and a friend drove to the home of the attacker and sat outside the house in the parked car, just waiting for her. Recounting the story, Shantae's mom says, "You have no idea what was going through my mind. She tells me that if she had taken action that day, whatever she would have done would have been far worse than what the girl did to Shantae." She acknowledges that handling the situation with violence is not necessarily the example she would like to set for her daughter. But, she explains, at times like this when someone wants to intimidate her daughter, she feels she would be justified in going to the girl's house to intimidate her. Shantae's mom also says that although she wanted to handle the situation the right way, she also wanted Shantae to be able to walk through the neighborhood without fear of another attack. Eventually, Shantae's mom decided to press charges against the young woman who had attacked her daughter, an action that Shantae initially protested. "They, her mother and the police, asked me if I wanted to press charges. They don't understand that that's not really what I wanted to do. I wanted to go around and hurt this girl." Later, she reconsidered, thinking, "Maybe if I do it this way, let the law handle it, something will happen." Shantae's mom both models and echoes this sentiment, explaining to Shantae's counselors, "And me, we're trying to let the law deal with it." She reaches this decision despite the fact that, like many inner-city residents, she is frequently frustrated by how local law enforcement deals with problems. She says that she tells Shantae that even though the law is slow and may not handle the attack the way the family might want, they have to accept that that is how it is. For Shantae's mom, who has also served time in prison, the consequences of confronting the girl herself would likely outweigh the benefits. "I've been to prison. I ain't afraid of prison," she tells me. "But I don't want to lose my life again. I don't want her to not have a mother." The police picked up, briefly detained, and then released the teenaged girl who hit Shantae with a brick. The girl then returned to the neighborhood, leaving Shantae on her own to negotiate future confrontations with her. Already, the two have met again and almost got into a fight, Shantae says. In that instance, Shantae and her girlfriend were walking down the street with her girlfriend's baby when Shantae saw the girl. The girl, in turn, saw her and said something, and then Shantae's friend said something back. The girl advised Shantae's friend, "You better watch out before you get the same thing that your friend got," referring to the assault. Shantae and her friend considered fighting the girl, but they hesitated because the girl also had a baby with her. Shantae telephoned her mother immediately after this confrontation. Shantae's mother then called on Shantae's father and brother to go and escort them home. A year after her injury, Shantae and I spoke about her decision to let the law handle it. "Nothing happened," she tells me. "Yeah, I don't see what they handled, if you asked me. I thought that was attempted murder or something, or attempted assault or something?" She asks, looking to me for confirmation. "Ain't that something?" she says as she shakes her head left to right. When I ask Shantae if she still thinks about the incident, she explains, "Like, if I'm walking past where it happened at, like if I walk past there, and it's like me and my friend, I be like, damn, man, that's just where I got hit in the head with the brick at." Sometimes, she tries to cope by making light of the event. I try to rewind it to make jokes of it, to make fun of it. I only think about it if I walk past there. Even now, a year later, Shantae must consciously manage her interactions with this young woman in order to avoid additional conflict, like there's plenty of times I walk and she walk right in front of me, Shantae gets up to demonstrate. Or I walk and she'll walk ahead of me. Sometimes I be wanting to do it, fight her, then I be like, she takes a deep breath, "Just go ahead home and just let it be. Just go home and just let it be." "What makes you decide to do that?" I ask. "'Cause it won't, look, if you keep going back at somebody, it won't solve anything. It will leave somebody dead and somebody in jail. Violence is not going to lead nowhere." Her family's intimate experience with the criminal justice system has made Shantae acutely aware of the potential consequences of resorting to violence. She explains, "Yeah, I used to think, yeah, I'm going to blow this heifer. I'm going to go get this. I'm going to do that. That ain't going to do nothing but leave me in the Juvenile Study Center, the city's juvenile jail, or up to LP's, one of 2 women's prisons in the state, somewhere. I'm not willing to sit up in no jail cell, telling somebody when to go to sleep, when to eat. No." Shantae, like many other inner-city girls, envisions better life possibilities for herself. That is not going to lead me somewhere, and I am not willing to throw my life away," she tells me. "I'm 16. I still got a whole life ahead of me and, no, I'm not willing to throw it away, not for something that dumb. 'Cause she hit me in the head with the brick. So, no. I just go ahead home and do what I was about to do." Shantae's commitment to nonviolence in all future confrontations is undermined, however, by her perception of the criminal justice system as ineffectual, apathetic, and potentially racist. When I ask her whether, if she were hit on the head with a brick today, she would call on the law to handle it, Shantae responds quickly and emphatically. "No. I would not press charges. No. The district, they don't do nothing." She continues, "It's been almost a year and a week." Then, no, she corrects herself, after stopping to think for a moment, a year and 3 days. "So, what have they done?" she asks and immediately supplies the answer, "Nothing." I ask Shantae why she thinks the police responded the way they did. She offers a racialized critique of the criminal justice system, because they, the police, see it as black-on-black crime. So they're not going to do nothing. I done already seen that. So, I question, if she were to be attacked again, what would she do? Shantae does not hesitate before replying, "I would have to go and beat her up." Shantae's perception of the criminal justice system, and particularly the police, has been informed not only by her personal experience with the detectives working her case, but also by her direct observation of police interactions with other neighborhood residents. Shantae and her neighbors watched as a young black man from the neighborhood was shot in the head and killed. Describing this violent episode, which had occurred only a few weeks earlier, she recalls, "It was a Sunday and I heard these boys arguing. The argument escalated quickly. "I just saw the boy get his head. I just seen him get shot." Witnessing the shooting made Shantae feel bad, she says, but it also made her angry at what she perceives as widespread indifference to violent acts when they occur in neighborhoods like hers. This indifference is, according to Shantae, directly related to racism. Let this shooting happen in a white person's neighborhood, they would have been found that boy who shot that boy in the head. But since they, the police, see it as black-on-black crime, they're not going to do nothing. Because they seen two black, African Americans, fighting. Shantae points out that she is merely stating facts, not engaging in reverse racism. "And it's not a racial thing with me, 'cause let me tell you, I got, racially, mixed people in my family. Matter of fact, I'm about to have my mixed nephew, that's mixed with black and Puerto Rican, so it's not a racial thing. But, like they had that boy that had got jumped in the Northeast, a predominantly white, working to middle-class area of the city. They had that white boy on the news when a couple of black boys do it, seriously injured him in a fight. But let that had been Martin Luther King High, let that had been a couple of black boys, they wouldn't have put that on the news." Shantae also considers the slow response from the ambulance and the police when the young black man in her neighborhood was shot as evidence of the indifference to, and disregard for, black life and black bodies. "The cops came before the ambulance did. They just threw him in the back of the car. They didn't put him in the back of the car, they threw him in the back of the car. He was already dead before he hit the ground, so why would y'all even rush there, like y'all was going to rush that man to the hospital? He was dead. And then how the ambulance? How the cops going to show up before the ambulance there? That was a white person, that white person would have survived. He would have been all on the news. He would have been all just jolly and happy. But no, that black boy had to die." The kind of distrustful relationship between neighborhood residents and the police that Shantae's remarks make clear is a key reason why many cases go unsolved. She is critical of both the police and of neighborhood residents who do nothing, in her words, to combat the violence that characterizes much of inner-city life, but it is only the residents' lack of action that she finds understandable. Residents resist assisting the police with investigations, labeled on the street as snitching, not only because of a fear of retaliation from assailants but also because of a fear that the police will turn on people who provide information. So while Shantae is deeply troubled by the violent crime she witnessed, and wants those responsible punished, she also understands why potential informants do not help police. She would not cooperate either if she knew who did it, she comments. "I wouldn't," she says, "I mean people would think this would be wrong. To me, I think it would be wrong, too. But, if I knew who killed that boy, I wouldn't have told the cops. No, I wouldn't have told the cops." "Why not?" I question. "Because the cops wouldn't be coming to question me. Talking about she trails off. "No, they won't be taking me to jail, interrogating me, no. They would not witness me to no crime. So soon as they can't find the person who did it, they can blame it all on me. I seen that happen to people before." "No." "Really?" I press, "You seen that happen to people before?" "Yeah," Shantae confirms. "No, it will not happen to me. I'll have a picture or something. I'll tell somebody else to do it, but I wouldn't do it. No." She pauses for a moment before announcing, "I don't even like cops." Shantae's observations of police and citizen interactions, as well as her own personal experience with the police, shape her understanding of the reliable resources available for negotiating conflict and responding to violence in her neighborhood. While once willing to let the law handle it, her experiences over the past year changed her perspective. Shantae is reluctant to let her mother handle it her way for fear that she might return to prison. She learned that she cannot trust the cops because when she gave them a chance they did nothing, and she drew the logical conclusion that she is primarily responsible for her well-being. "I would have to go and beat her up." Shantae's narrative is but one example of how everyday experiences in distressed urban neighborhoods lead African American, inner-city girls to develop the same sort of adversarial attitude toward the police that is typical of young and poor black men. Shantae's experience informs her critical analysis of the relationship between the criminal justice system, race, and racism in her predominantly black and low-income, inner-city neighborhood. Shantae's experiences also expose a fundamental flaw in the relationship between inner-city residents and the police. Young women may want to call on the police to ensure their own safety, just as people in other social locations do, but they know that doing so in their social world carries many risks. This is how a large number of inner-city youth, including girls, come to believe that the police are not there to protect them. Too many girls like Shantae conclude that the law does not work for them or their neighbors because neither the police nor the legal system as a whole values the lives of Black people. Within this context, adolescent inner-city girls learn the importance of using a set of personal resources to negotiate conflict and violence in everyday life. In other words, these adolescent girls, like their male counterparts, become socialized into the code of the street.